Now to a developing story out of Texas. On Friday, federal judges issued conflicting rulings against a ban on abortion medication, which would affect states across the country. The rulings threaten Minnesota's newly passed PRO Act, which works to protect reproductive health care and abortion services in the state. Today, lawmakers and advocates gathered to discuss the ruling and the impact it could have here at home. Let's take you there now.
I want to share that there is, though the decisions have been, to me, heartbreaking watching that unfold over the weekend, that I know that there is much hope that we have here in Minnesota. Just to remind us all that Minnesota legislature, the House and the Senate, worked quickly in January to pass the PRO Act to codify that everyone has the right to choose for their own body, their reproductive decisions. And there are still a couple of laws that we are working on. So the Reproductive Freedom Codification Act is a bill that would repeal and remove old and outdated laws that have mandates on our bodies that should not be on the books anymore. And so we are still moving that piece of it in the House and the Senate. Unfortunately, there has been a little bit of stalling around that because there has been a lot of pushback from the anti-choice individuals, particularly around some of these old laws. But I will say that we are very hopeful that we'll continue to move those through the House and the Senate. The Reproductive Freedom Defense Act moved out of the House, off of the House floor. We worked very diligently with our chief author, Representative Agbaje, to ensure that the House was fully behind this bill. That's House File 366. And in the Senate, the bill has been moving, and we have the step of still having it heard in the House. But what we've seen unfold over the weekend really has continued to push us and to have resolve and continuing this work that, you know, we were told that the work didn't need to be done in Minnesota because we were already a state that protected reproductive rights. What we are seeing now is the overreach from other states and continuing to limit individuals' ability to choose. We cannot have that happen in the state of Minnesota.
I'm standing here today to reaffirm what the Reproductive Freedom Caucus knew, the reasons that we formed in the first place. A legislative force to preserve the rights for all people to make their own healthcare decisions with their doctors, free from government interference. We joined together, over 80 lawmakers, to create this caucus because we knew these rights were under attack, and we knew the courts would not protect us. The U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade drove home what we've always known, or what we've long known, that we cannot depend on courts stacked with anti-abortion ideologues to apply the rule of law fairly and defend even long-established reproductive rights and freedoms. And this train wreck of competing decisions out of Texas and Washington makes that all the more clear. But let me remind us that this is not the only thing happening right now. Just last week, Idaho became the first state to pass a law restricting travel to another state to get abortion care that is legal there. We do not have the luxury of waiting to pass the RFDA. To date, just this year, there have been 492 anti-trans bills introduced in state legislatures across the country. More of them are passing than ever before. We do not have the luxury of waiting to pass the trans refuge bill. Minnesotans don't have the luxury of waiting for us. Our neighbors in surrounding states need us to act. Families across the country are waiting for us. The time for clear, courageous leadership is now. We must find the political will to act, and to act now. The PRO Act essentially codifies reproductive health as a fundamental right in Minnesota. The problem with that, as we're seeing by judges, that can be up to the opinion of a judge. And when we have conflicting things on the books, like the restrictions on abortion, even though they've been ruled unconstitutional, they are still on the books. A court could rule that those have more standing than the PRO Act. And so that is why we feel like we cannot have those conflicting laws on the books, and the reason we really need to pass the RFCA to remove those from the books to strengthen the PRO Act and remove those restrictions. The RFCA is a collection of essentially portions of law statutes that have been ruled unconstitutional, are archaic, or no longer in effect, that put barriers to reproductive health, or also additional barriers on like sodomy, adultery, things like that. Removing those from law. It's essentially a bill of repealers of restrictions on people's individual reproductive freedoms. It has passed the House, passed all the committees in the House, and is in the Health Omnibus Bill in the House. It has also passed all the committees in the Senate, but is at this point moving as a standalone. So we have a couple of different paths to get it through.
It is also unclear what the FDA's response will be. So the decision out of Texas binds the FDA as an agency, including on its limitations to male medication abortion, which was the piece that the Comstock Act was used to make the case for. So we'll have to see how the FDA responds to this. And in the meantime, it means medication abortion does still remain available across the country and in Minnesota. Mifepristone and misoprostol, the two medications typically used in medication abortion, account for over half of all abortions in the first trimester in Minnesota, but also across the country. And really since the pandemic, that it has increased dramatically because the pills were available to be mailed to patients at their homes. So this decision is also trying to get at that point of access, which has been a huge improvement, especially for people who live far away from abortion providers. So in Minnesota at this moment, you can get a medication abortion or a procedural abortion in clinic. And we're hopeful that that won't change, but we don't know. And I think that we all feel extremely uncomfortable being left at the whims of rogue judges in states with completely different values than Minnesotans have. Mifepristone is used for more than just medication abortions. Doctors do also sometimes use that medication to help with early miscarriage management or ectopic pregnancies. So again, it's just another example of, because there's this overwhelming drive to try and ban abortions, the anti-abortion movement is willing to interfere in healthcare providers' best judgment and ability to make the decisions that are right for their patients. And we just need to draw an extremely clear line that we're not okay with that. We will not participate in the state of Minnesota.
And can I just add, based on your question, that a lot of times the argument around the anti-abortion movement is protection of women, right? That it is making sure that women are safe and protected. This ruling absolutely shows what we have known the whole time, that that is frankly bullshit. This will be more dangerous. It will be more painful for women to have medication abortions. The effective rate is lower. This is not better healthcare. This is not safer healthcare. They did not ban and end abortion. They are trying again to ban and end safe abortions. So, to be really clear, they said it out loud. This is a decision that will hurt pregnant people and will make the care that they need less effective and less safe.
Keep watching CBS News Minnesota for continuing coverage.